Welcome everyone to the 2021 Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maritere Velas. I'm an award-winning author, parenting topic expert, bilingual parenting mentor, and for the last 25 years, I have been an advocate of raising bilingual, multilingual, and multicultural children. I wrote a column for La Opinion newspaper in Los Angeles for 12 years at a time when there were no books and no resources available for parents raising bilingual children and trying to find a balance between language and culture. Over the last 7 years, I have developed a platform that offers resources and education for parents raising multilingual and multicultural children ready to compete in a global society. That includes 4 books for parents, 2 bilingual children's books, a podcast in Spanish, as well as Instagram lives that elevate and highlight Latino entrepreneurs, including authors and Latina business owners. Our topic today is embracing the non-monolithic American Latino experience in picture books. Our purpose is to showcase kid-lit authors and illustrators that will share the importance of writing and illustrating authentic stories in children's picture books and their take on why many publishers are missing the mark in representing the American Latinx diaspora. Our esteemed group of panelists include Shogreen, Jay de la Vega, and Carla Monterrosa. Shogreen is an artist and storyteller from Guayaquil, Ecuador. His imagination is fueled by his childhood, science, folklore, and his family and friends. For the last decade, he has worked in the animation industry for companies like Cartoon Network and Disney. His artwork has been featured in multiple art galleries and publications around the world. He's currently designing the vinyl toys like Guru del Toro, as well as writing, drawing, and directing many projects from his art laboratory in Burbank, California. An avid reader, Jay de la Vega, found that none of the protagonists from the books she read looked anything like her. Not to mention already having to hop from one sleepy town to the next with her government bound family. She felt just shy of belonging. Now, as a writer and illustrator, Jay found her voice in children's literature and is an advocate for equality, social justice, and representation, bringing Latinx culture front and center in both urban and suburban neighborhoods. Jay hopes to normalize the colorful lives lived by so many and create the book she once wished she had. Carla Monterrosa was born and raised in sunny San Salvador, El Salvador. She's an illustrator and animator on a mission to draw a world in which it's okay to feel awkward. Carla graduated from Emily Carr University of Art and Design with a BFA in animation in 2013 and currently lives in the unceded ancestral lands of, and I'm hoping to say this right, Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations, also known as Vancouver, British Columbia. Welcome to all of you. Before we begin our discussion, I would like each of you to tell us a little bit about your book. Shogrin, you want to start?
Yes. So I wrote and laid out Kid del Toro, and it was illustrated by my good friend Pacoto Martinez. I'm a big fan. A lot of my friends know this. I'm a huge fan of Guillermo del Toro, but I also wanted to write a book that were of books that reminded me like of my childhood when I was like I like all of us, we have the universal fear of like the dark, monsters under our bed. So it was an inspiration of that and an inspiration of Guillermo del Toro's childhood, and Kid del Toro was kind of born out of that, and I wanted to sort of make it have a story that for it to be okay to embrace your fear, and and very much like in Guillermo's original story, he made a promise to the monster. If it wouldn't scare him, he would be its friends forever. And now Guillermo features monsters in all of his movies and projects. Um, so it was both personal and a tribute to one of my, heroes, and who I, consider has paved the road for a lot of people to now, have more opportunities, Latinos in specific, in the entertainment industry. So.
I love it. I love it. Carla, what about you?
I illustrated the book Jefferson, actually, which is written by Kat Trejo and Scott Martin Rowe. And it's a book based on the real life story of Jefferson, who is a little boy who goes to school and finds out that people don't really know how to pronounce his name. And after being very frustrated with that, he decides that, with the help of his family, he decides that this is just an opportunity for others to learn how to say his name correctly. And this is, a chance for him to like stand up on who he really is and what makes him proud of his name. I was very happy to work on this book, not to the same extent, but like, living in an English speaking country, I am so happy to hear my name Monterrosa and not like Monterrosa. So it's really nice. I can relate to some of it. He comes from a Salvadoran family, so it was very, very fun to draw everyone based on like people that I know or like faces that I've seen. Yeah, I think it's a very lovely book. It was such an honor to illustrate it, and Kat and Scott were like wonderful to collaborate with.
That's awesome. And I have to tell you that, my name when I first moved to California, everybody called me Maritere. Maritere. Like, so every time someone says it, I get so excited.
It feels so nice. It feels so nice.
So I totally understand.
Yeah, like a nice like Carla. I'm like, that's me.
How about you, Jay? Tell us about your book.
My book is called Wepa. It's actually coming out in, I believe, April of 2023. And it's about a little girl who has ADHD. And the underlying theme of the story is dismantling chancla culture and allowing children to be their best self and to step into that and allow them to discover who they are and where they fit and how they can work in a world that tells them that's not how things are supposed to be done. So she goes to ballet class, but unfortunately she just keeps messing up and the music gets too much a hold of her. So she finds a place where her wepa fits. And I'm so excited for it. And I'm really, really loving the fact that little LIBROS saw the potential in this story and how important it is.
Great messages in all your books. I love it. I can't wait to read them all. In a recent article published by the Journal of Latinos and Education and written by two teachers from the Department of Teacher Education at Texas Women's University, the writers discussed the increase in Spanish literature for children since 2008 and its benefits for bilingual programs as they contribute to authentic teaching of writing and reading. Yet, could these stories be representative of the immigrant population, only thus creating stereotypes? And if so, how can other bilingual students, perhaps from non-Latino families with higher schooling and finances, identify themselves with the characters in these stories? Cultural patterns were discussed and the need to be inclusive and mindful of the cultures of all the students in bilingual classrooms. We all know that representation matters, yet representation is more than just a Latino surname attached to a picture book, right? Parting from here, I will ask our panelists questions to address our topic and ask them to share their knowledge and experience. Shogwin, let's start with you.
Okay.
As an Ecuadorian, what has been your experience as an artist in the children's world here in the United States? And how easy or not it has been to stand up for your voice, your authenticity?
I've definitely come across different times of where I've pitched projects and things, and you know, culture can be very much like I had an unfortunate experience one time at a major studio where I pitched something and they kind of automatically said it was, another culture, and I said no, this is very specifically from Ecuador. So I think it is very important, and not in each country, let's say Mexico or Ecuador, we all have, like, every country has a each province has their own folklore, their own history, their own story to tell. So I think it's super important for us to, write books about it, stories, movies, because it just makes the world richer, and and it's more of a real picture of what the real world is, how diverse we are. Along the way, I have to say, I've had to I've just, everything that I've done, I've worked hard for. I know that other people have had probably, a tougher road ahead, but I want to create projects and things that will inspire others to hopefully, do the same. So
I like that. Jay, like you, my children grew up in a world where there were no books whose characters they could identify with. Were you drawn to writing and illustrating at an early age? Why is it important for children to see themselves in the stories they read, and for all children to learn about all the millions of ways and about other cultures? Isn't that how we create empathy and understanding for all?
Yes, I believe that representation creates opportunity. And when you see yourself in a book or on the television or in a movie, you're capable of putting yourself in that position, and you're like, I can be the president, I can be a ballerina, I can be whatever I'd like to be. But if you don't see it, you subconsciously think that that space is not for me. This opportunity is not built for me. And unfortunately, what I grew up seeing was a lot of books featuring POC that were either built from great trauma or being extraordinary. And I didn't feel extraordinary. And I was like, where are picture books that represent me, a child that just likes to doodle, and sometimes I mess up in class, and there was an opportunity for me to fail or to learn from my mistakes. So I wanted to build that. I wanted other children to see it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to reach for the stars. You don't have to be extraordinary. You can be just yourself, and that is absolutely enough. So that's really what I'm going for in my picture books, to represent those things, and also talk about things that maybe people are not discussing, like chancla culture, like representing ADHD. It's not as common or talked about within our community. And I think that needs to be a conversation that's stepped up and accepted and learn different ways to make our children better, and to make them, just to inspire them to reach for more, that they're okay,
And it's so important to have those conversations early on, I think, even before they start school, because then, they go and they see other kids from other cultures, other nationalities, and, they come home, that's like, oh, there was, this child in my class. And that sparks a conversation between the parent and the child about that culture, or that nationality, that race. And I think it's important to do it early on. Carla, as an illustrator, how important is it for you to use your voice? Why was it important to illustrate foods authentic to the Salvadoran American experience? Or that Catherine, the author of Jefferson, included typical words like cipote in the book?
I think the like Chabrin was saying, like the hyper specificity of our cultures, the micro identities that we have, even within, the big umbrella of the Latinx diaspora. it is so wonderful when we can make connections like, oh, like Salvadorans love sopa de pata, and like Hondurans love baleadas, and like it's fun. And then we have like these, we get to find such moments of joy and in being like, oh my God, like, of course you guys love this. It's, you know, it's so good. And I think it was a good moment to show with foods. I think it was a really good moment to show what a meal in my household would have looked like any day. And instead of, I don't know, like defaulting to the obvious, which would have been pupusas, to think of like, yes, yeah, like we would eat them, but like in an everyday dinner, it could have been like anything else. And I chose sopa de pata. I chose to draw the meeting sopa de pata because it was, it's like such an ugly dish visually. It's so delicious, and the way that people eat it is so specific. Like Drew Jefferson and his grandpa Papa Jefferson, like taking out like all the vegetables and the meat and eating them separately from like from the caldo, the broth, and everyone, like the adults in their 30s or 40s, like drinking everything in the bowl. And to me, that's like a very specific way of like how adults, children, and like older people eat soup. And regarding the language and the specific words, for me, that's one of my favorite things about like meeting other like Spanish speaking Latin people, is the moment where I'm like, oh, what do you mean? What does that mean to you? What does that word mean to you? Like I was recently visiting my sister in Mexico, and you know, the whole like popote pajilla debate, like being there and asking for a straw and being like, oh, that's not the word they use here. I think that's so fun. It gives so much color, so much texture to the language, like that we have been able to do so many playful things with Spanish. I think is such a wonderful thing. It speaks to like our ingenuity as, you know, as a culture, what we do with our families. Yeah, I think it's just a big reference to where our joy comes from.
Well, and our cultures are all different. We all have our little nuances within our Hispanic cultures. You know, in Puerto Rico, we use the word huepa just to be excited. And, you know, now there's a lot of people now that know what that means. But so I just think it's great that, you know, we are now going to have these books that have all these different words and ways of life that is so important for all the children to learn. But why should this be important to children's book publishers?
I think that naming a reality that comes from like an everyday situation is very powerful, as opposed to thinking of what do people expect to see when we say Latin, or what do people expect to see when we say, you know, Honduran, Uruguayan, whatever. What the question should be, what is the truth for these families? For these families, what does a normal dinner look like? And it can get like even, you know, more and more specific. Like there are so many, for example, like Taiwanese Salvadoran families, like what do like so many of their dinners look like? You know, what does their house decor look like? I think that's where the questions should be coming for publishers, from like, what is the truth? It's not so much as like, what do people expect to see? What do people think San Salvador might look like? You know, it's not about performing Latinidad for an audience. It's about the very personal, the very already existing real experiences that people go through, and prioritizing, giving those decision-making positions to people who can speak to them.
That's wonderful. Shogren, most of the stories that have been told, whether in film, books, or TV, the majority are always about the struggle of the Latinx experience. Mm-hmm. And those are important stories to tell. But Latino writers can also write about joyful experiences, about monsters, about fairy tales, science fiction, right?
Yes,
Tell us a
I
little
mean,
bit about
and
it.
actually, and then no, and it's so funny you say that because one of my favorite quotes that Guillermo said is, "What makes your films Mexican?" And he says, "Me." And I don't necessarily, but just because I'm from Ecuador, I don't necessarily want to write, like just about Ecuadorian folklore. I want to write stories that interest me and what I like. From my personal point of view, from my own experience, yes, there are stories that I want to very very much be like, this is Ecuador and this is the many beautiful things of Ecuador. But I want to be able to just not be sometimes judged just because I just want to be able to exist and be part of the world. But I also think those kind of stories are very important to end a lot of the ignorance in the world and make our culture richer. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Jay, let's address the elephant in the room. Given the increase in Spanish and bilingual children's book literature over the last 12 years, why is it still so difficult for Latino authors to get publishers interested in their stories? Why aren't more general market publishers or literary agents courting more Latino authors?
Okay, how do I put this a nice way?
Very diplomatic, right?
Yes. There is still a tokenism when it comes to any type of Latin story or picture book, movie, whatever. There is an expectation that it should look and it should feel that way. And if it doesn't, then it's not marketable. So basically, they're feeding these stories to an audience that is not Latino. Okay, so they're making it palatable for people. And actually, recently, I had someone and I asked in the group, how does this cover look? And the person told me that I should explain what huepa means and that I should make it very clear, despite the fact my audience already knows what it means. They already know what huepa feels like. And they were essentially accusing me of excluding people. Even though there's Google. There's absolutely Google. And I feel like publishing needs to understand that the same way a child in the inner city may not understand what a brush is or a cul-de-sac. They may not understand these words, yet we expect them to know what they are without explanation, without giving them any leverage to succeed. Why can't our experience be the same way? Why can't our books feel the same way? Why can't they read the same way? It's super okay to just put a Spanish word in there and you can Google it. You can learn more about that culture without having to whitewash it or water it down, because that's what it is. And I feel like when we do that, when publishers realize it's not just a token, person to publish, I think that we'll get closer to our goal,
I like that. I like that you say that, we have to explain ourselves all the time and we shouldn't. What about you, Carla? What are your thoughts on that?
So I definitely, I agree. I agree with what Jay mentioned about tokenizing, and an experience for me that comes to mind when I think about this is a time that I did a project with a client, and they also wanted to do a bit about my everyday life. And in that bit about my everyday life, they wanted to get some footage of me like going to this Latin store and like speaking Spanish and walking in front of this like mariachi mural and like, fully like just fully tokenize me into this costume of what I think the stereotypical image of Latinidad might look like. And I think that comes from a place of wanting to perform Latinidad as a costume instead of accepting it as a just a word that encompasses so many cultures, so many traditions, across so much time in history, a big chunk of the world geographically, so many languages. And I think that is, I do find it a bit careless to treat it as like one thing, like Latinidad is one thing, when it is so many small things. And that's what makes it so rich, diverse, and beautiful. And I think tokenizing is part of it, but I also think that part of why we are seeing more Latinx, Latina authors, illustrators, and publishers, and authors, illustrators, and publishers is because our communities have responded very well to what has been offered. Like, I think that folks are really supporting, taking very seriously, and following, championing those who have come forward or who have had the opportunity and to be seen in like literary spaces, even though there's still a lot of work to do, especially for like Black, Latinx people and people with disabilities and LGBTQIS people of Latinx descent.
Yes, and I think that more and more of us from different Latin American countries are writing books for these children, because let's face it, our children are growing up in a multicultural world, and that's what they should be reading about, all these different cultures. Chogrin, your thoughts on this? Your mic is off.
I can only speak from now. Oh, it's off. You can't
No,
hear me?
now it's okay.
Oh, now it's okay. Okay. What I was saying is I can only speak to my experience and to what I can relate to, and those are the kind of works that I want to put out there. And one of the things that I grew up with that I always struggled with is being, a hybrid. Being my name, Chogrin, is a word that means hybrid, is Cholo Gringo, and Cholo has a different meaning, and Ecuador means Ecuadorian of the South Coast. It doesn't have the same meaning as it does in LA. So so I want to write stories. A lot of the stories that I write, besides coming of age stories, I want to write stories about what it is to be like, I'm not Ecuadorian enough for the Ecuadorians. I'm not Gringo enough for the Gringos. I want to write story. I'm very much inspired by the painting by Jorge González Camarena called El Abrazo, which is a conquistador and an Aztec embracing, as they've after battle, and I think a lot of us can relate to that, and I want to be able to, for people to be okay to embrace, both your cultures, and and it makes us more diverse. So yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I would like all of you to address this question. How do we get the retailers to be more supportive of Native, Latino, authentic stories in picture books? How do we hold publishers and bookstores accountable? Carla, what would you start?
Thinking of how to make bookstores accountable, how to hold them accountable. That's a really big question. And I think that when you go into the bookstore and you see the little, we're talking specifically about children's literature. So when you see the little like reading note for children, and you think specifically of which children are we talking to, I think it's fair to pose the questions of are these books readily available for like all children who might come into the store? Are the children who will come into the store, are they going to be seeing themselves? Are they going to be seeing stories about them, their families, children who they might know? Because if not, then the bookstore is doing a huge disservice to the community that it's serving. Like, yes, it's a business, but it's also how alienating it is to not even address like part of your audience, to not even acknowledge that here in this bookstore where like, we sell the possibility of like entering so many worlds, so many stories about so many different things, that there wouldn't be a story about you who is like a child living with ADHD, or a child who comes, I don't know, from, Puerto Rico, or a child who speaks, I don't know, Arabic. I think that it is irresponsible. I think it's a disservice to not fully acknowledge. And also like, it's not so much about the children who might be there, but also who the children who these children might meet.
Yeah.
Being ready to know that, oh, I read a book about a child who lives with ADHD, and now I am more prepared to like empathize. And while I might not live with the same struggles, I know about them. I've learned about them. And regarding publishers and support, I think people will support the books and projects that come from the heart and come from a place of authenticity.
I think, sorry, not to interrupt.
No, go.
I think we need to support more publishers like LIL Libros, not just because I published a book under LIL Libros, but honestly, that was one of the reasons that I was so excited to do the book, because one of my main goals when I was in art school is whatever children's books I do, I wanted to be exclusively bilingual, because I wanted to represent both my cultures. And I think we need more publishers like LIL Libros. We need to support those publishers. And we also need to make sure that all these stores, like I know that my book is featured at Target, but every Target that I've gone to in different states doesn't necessarily feature a bilingual section. And I think that's very important, that we need to, as a community, to speak up and say, hey, let's feature these books and make them available.
I agree 100%. And I think that, a lot of times it's, we as parents need to ask for those books. If we go to a Target and we don't see the book, we should tell them, or Barnes and Noble, or, we should, or even our little small local bookstores should be carrying our books. And I think, we need to get more involved, and maybe I agree with you 100%. Support the little Libros that, is really, we don't have to like knock so hard at their store for them to embrace our stories, like, the big publishers do. Jay, what about you? What are your, how do we hold publishers and bookstores accountable?
I'm actually on the other end of the spectrum. I'm not so much like, let's ask. I'm more like, let's burn the whole thing down. I think that we need to. It's not real. It's not realistic. And we can't build on the foundation that's already been built, because it's already been proven over and over again. It does not work. It's already been proven that the stories they want to publish are just the stories they want, not the stories that we want to hear, but the stories they think will be the most digestible. I think the best way we can get publishers to publish authentic stories is to start by saying no, by stop giving into the pressure of, oh my gosh, my book is published, so this is exciting. No, I don't want my story to sound this way. It is very important for me to not have my story whitewashed. It is very important to me for this to not be taken a certain way. I've dropped agents. I'm very upfront with my publishers, because I actually have 2 books coming out about, this is my story. I do not want it whitewashed. I do not want it watered down. I will not live with that. I can't live with that. And I think we have to start digging deep into our morals and say enough is enough, and also support local bookstores. Shout out to Word Up Bookstore, nonprofit in New York. They're awesome, and that is their main goal. Shop from these local bookstores that are going to fearlessly feature, stories from all cultures and from all religions, and give children a space to feel their authentic self. You know, they don't need more books about bears and and dogs. Like there's plenty of that out there. Those things are not hard to find, you know, but these stories are hard to find. Support the bookstores that are doing the work and the people that are doing the work. And don't be afraid to say no, absolutely not, you know.
I agree with you 100%. I gave up a long time ago of trying to get a big publisher. I'm not interested in that. I'd rather have my book published by someone that believes in my story and what I'm trying to do. I agree with you, Shawin. I, from the get-go, decided, because of all the speaking engagements I do with parents, that bilingual books are the way to go. And I just love that Little Libros is here. And another question for all of you, speaking of Little Libros, since 2014, when Little Libros was established, there have been a few other Latina-owned publishers that have emerged. Cielito Lindo, Con Todo Press, Del Alma Publications, Cinco Punto Books, for example. These publishers came to be because the industry doesn't seem to value our stories, but even they encounter uphill battles. One of those battles is the idea that our stories alienate others, non-Latinos, for example, but that has been disproven. In fact, when young readers are exposed to various social practices, values, and belief systems of other cultures, they develop keen awareness and empathy. We are shaped by what we read and see. What would you want readers to take away from your work? Shogreen, you want to start?
Yeah, I think for me, since I only have one book, I think it's for me, I guess the biggest message is like to be proud of who you are, you know, whether that's being, you know, weird or different or liking what you like. It's just like just love who you are and embrace yourself. You know, if you're a mix of all cultures, if you know, I think that's kind of the biggest thing, because for me growing up is every place that I've gone, whether it's school or work, I never seem to quite fit in, but I feel like I've always made my own pathway, like my own bubble, and that's how I've gotten to where I am today, you know. And I think the part of it is because I did have loving parents that always just let me be who I wanted to be. So I think if sometimes some kids don't have that, you know, and if they can see it in a book, whereas like, you know, they can love themselves for who they are, I think that's a very important message.
Jay?
The big takeaway I want from my book is one, we don't all look like J-Lo. So I feature a lot of Afro-Latina.
I love that.
And we could do better. We could do better. We are not disrespecting our elders. We are not disrespecting our cultures by trying to find ways to do better and to make better for our children. It's absolutely okay. You know, and we can speak to our parents and we can speak to our children in kind ways and grow and spread that love. So that's the big takeaway from it. You know, I really want children to see themselves and to say, hey, she looks like me, or hey, I'd love this situation, or wow, she's in a bodega, you know what I mean? So I really, really want them to see that and be happy.
That's beautiful. Carla?
Okay, before I answer the question of what I want people to take out of my work, this idea that like Latino books are alienating non-Latinos,
Oh my God, oh.
like then why did we all grow up so obsessed with like white American television? You know, it had nothing to do with us. And, you know, and that's like, you know, as like a, you know, 12-year-old growing up in San Salvador, like all I cared about was like some prom in Ohio. It was like, why, you know, of course not. No, anyone can, you know, anyone can care about someone else's struggles. Develop empathy. Okay, but regarding my work, I think I would like people, or I would like whoever consumes the book to find pride in their sense of humor, to find pride in like their family's traditions, in like their family's quirks. And I think that uh, finding like the special, the special things in like your family, biological or chosen, whatever whatever brings you humor, joy, the family inside jokes. I think those are the things that make up the big realities of culture. So I hope that whoever consumes this book can see that I did my best to like draw a family that has like their own like micro culture and their own inside jokes, their own quirks. So I hope that they will be able to see that in their like everyday life and enjoy that as well.
Yes, I love that, and I just feel like it's like a validation of heritage. All the books, all the work that you're doing, you're validating your heritage, and that's what the children are going to see in your books. So Green, a child needs to see themselves represented in more ways than one, by more ways than color of the character's skin or the also author's surname. The reader needs to see the way we live, like we were talking, the way we talk at home, the words we use, the foods that we eat. All of that matters, and books are crucial because they help young readers in their identity formation. And we all know identity formation is important in the social development of children, as it gives them a sense of belonging and acceptance in society, which is why it's very important we allow Latinx authors and illustrators the freedom to express those unique nuances within our own community. Can we talk about why it is important that we do not see the Latinx community as monolith? Shogun, why don't you start, and then we'll ask Carla and Jay.
Sorry, I need to think about it for a little bit. I'll let
Okay.
somebody. Sorry.
Okay, ladies, anyone want to start?
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think that when we think of any culture as a monolith, we run the risk of giving the responsibility of something that an individual, giving individual responsibility to everyone who is part of a group. And that is something that can be incredibly dangerous politically, but also, just in people's personal lives. When we don't give people like when we don't treat them as individuals and we just sort of group them as being part of something bigger that they might not have full control over, we are dehumanizing people, and we are letting our preconceived notions about a specific group take over whatever knowledge of them as people we might have or might have the opportunity to know. I feel like I'm saying it in too many words, but essentially just that it's dehumanizing to not know a person and to just attribute them a big descriptor that might not fit with them or might not have anything to do with their way of life and might not be reflective of who they are.
And adding to that, I totally agree with that. And adding to that, I think that having a publisher, again, from my experience, like LIBROS, who, and I'm speaking completely honestly, just let me write the book, Kid del Toro, with no, really, if anything, if they had any suggestions, it was just grammar suggestions just to make sound better, and that's why I'm so proud of it, because it's you know, the book that we wanted to put out there. And I think that's you know, very important for us to be able to have that, you know, like Jay was saying, that without having things in there, you know, to be forced upon it, just a completely, you know, free, you know, creative expression.
Jay?
I think when you put everyone under umbrella, it becomes hazardous almost. You know, I've lived in places where people are like, oh, what's a Puerto Rican? Is that, you know, a Black person and a Mexican person mixed? And I was so confused, like, what are you talking about? Like, I am my own person, that and we have our own culture, and it's not as common. There aren't a lot of Puerto Ricans out here, and when you just branch everybody under one common umbrella, you take away their heritage, you take away who they are, and people just think it's all the same. You know, they think it's all the same, not realizing that there are differences, there's a history to people, and it is absolutely dangerous. You know, within our society, it's absolutely dangerous just to pack everyone together, you know. So I don't know, I like, I keep thinking about going past the mariachi mural. I keep thinking of you mentioning that, and going into the grocery store, and I'm just like we don't shop at Whole Foods, like you know, I can get Saison from Walmart. So it is dangerous, and it is disruptive when you are not learning about other people and distinguishing them from each other. So and
we go back to the importance of making sure that our children are reading these stories early on. And I'm so grateful that you are all doing that you're contributing to all the children. My children didn't have that that experience. We had no books where they saw themselves in. So I'm so grateful to you and to Little Libros and all the other Latino-owned publishers out there that see the value. Thank you, everyone, for attending, embracing the non-monolithic American Latino experience in picture books at the Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival. Has been an amazing panel. Thank you to our panelists for their insights and sharing their experience. I am hopeful that we're walking away with wonderful ideas and suggestions that will encourage readers, bookstores, and publishers to support more Latino authors and authentic stories in the diaspora, because our stories matter. Mil gracias.